Hello! Welcome to All A+ Essays. The best among the best. My name is Julie and I will be your instructor as we read through Susan Glaspells Trifles essay. The article's source is embedded in the video description below. Feel free to read along. Please note that you can get a custom, plagiarism-free essay for as little as $10 a page at All A+ Essays. The link is in the description. Susan Glaspells' play, Trifles, explores the fact that women pay attention to the little things that may lead to the solution of a bigger problem. Why do women pay attention to the little things? Could it be because the attention to detail is the starting point to solving the bigger problem? Let's think of the little things like pieces of a puzzle. When all the little pieces are put together, they usually form a picture. Therefore you see the whole picture. In this play, the men think it's just like women to worry about the little details that they see throughout the house. They think it's trifle. What they don't seem to realize is that by the women paying attention to the little things, they're actually solving the murder of Mr. Wright. The first little detail is the fruit preserves when Mrs. Peters said to Mrs. Hale she worried about that when it turned so cold. She said the fire'd go out and her jars would break. That's when the sheriff replied, "Well, can you beat the women held for murder and worrying about her preserves?" Glaspell, 2010, lines 27 to 29, pages 143. If Mrs. Wright hadn't been preoccupied, she could have started a fire to keep the preserves from freezing. Why was Mrs. Wright preoccupied? This is probably when the two women thought that perhaps the Wrights were having an argument or maybe even something worse was happening. Another little detail is the fact that Mrs. Wright didn't wake up while her husband was being strangled to death. Unless Mr. and Mrs. Wright slept in separate beds, she should have felt him struggling while the noose was being put around his neck or heard him gasping for air. It also seems strange that there was a gun in the house and it wasn't used. Why strangle him? Why not use the gun? According to an essay on Susan Glaspells Trifles, the author noted the strangling of Mr. Wright, which perplexes all when a gun was handy, is reminiscent of the strangling of that bird. Susan Glaspell, another little detail the women noticed was the empty bird cage that was stuffed in the cupboard with no bird in it. Mrs. Hale asked if the Wrights had a cat, to which Mrs. Peters replied, "No, she didn't have a cat." She's got that feeling some people have about cats being afraid of them. Glaspell, 2010, line 84, pages 146. Then they noticed the broken door hinge and Mrs. Hale thought it looked like someone was rough with it, and being rough with the cage was perhaps a sign of anger. An example of anger and hostility was when Mrs. Hale described what it was like to be around Mr. Wright. But he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters. Just to pass the time of day with him like a raw wind that gets to the bone. Glaspell, 2010, line 97, pages 146. Mrs. Hale then went on to explain how Mrs. Wright was like a bird. Real sweet and pretty, but kind of timid and fluttery. How she'd change. Glaspell, 2010, line 101, pages 146. The Mrs. Wright that is described there is different from the character we know in the play. The women we know in the play seem to be a cold and angry woman. She didn't have children and the only company she had was a bird. Mrs. Hale suggested to Mrs. Peters that she bring the quilt to Mrs. Wright in the jail. While they look for scissors and more patchwork to take with them, Mrs. Hale finds the dead bird wrapped up in a little box, to which she exclaims, "But, Mrs. Peters, look at it. Its neck. Look at its neck. It's all to the other side," and Mrs. Peters says, "Somebody wrung its neck." Glaspell, lines 107 to 108, pages 146. This is when the two women realize Mrs. Wright killed her husband, but neither of them wants to break the alliance they made and turn her in. Mrs. Wright was living her life as if she was already living in jail. That kind of life is such a lonely and isolated one. A person will do just about anything to escape that emotional and physical prison. Because these women took notice of all the little things, they were able to put the puzzle together, piece by piece. They were able to feel the loneliness and pain of Mrs. Wright. They were able to see the whole picture and solve the case. Because the men were only interested in physical evidence, they were not able to see the little things that the women did. They were not able to come to any conclusions as to what happened and why. Instead, they made fun of and belittled Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters for worrying about the little things. References: Glaspells 2011, Trifles, India Pike and A9AYTZ2X5V, eds. Literature, a world of writing poems, plays and essays. Retrieved from Vital Source ebook for Education Management Cooperation, Susan Glaspells Trifles. Little Things Mean a Lot, 123helpme.com. Retrieved from u.123helpme.com/ view.asp?ID = 8589 on October 21, 2010. Thank you for taking your time to listen to me. I hope you enjoyed learning about Susan Glaspells Trifles essay as much as I did. Kindly remember that you can get a custom, plagiarism-free essay at All A+ Essays for as little as $10. The link is in the description. See you next time.